You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today, but before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to Oklahoma HOF on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma. And it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. A huge shout out to Governor Anatobi for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my two pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my two golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other. What's up, guys? Welcome back to an episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. We are down at, Taylor, I'm going to get this wrong, Rose Records? Mm-hmm. Okay, we're down at Rose Records in Britain. It's a great spot. Taylor Moore is behind the ones and twos. I appreciate you. Taylor's link for everything he does will be in the description. If you need anything recording, Taylor's your guy. But we got a great podcast episode today. Great guest. Gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Bob Ricks, who we played golf together for the first time, and we had a pretty successful go at it, right?
We came in first. That's pretty good.
We did pretty good, yeah. We're both on the Oklahoma Golf Association. Both have a huge passion for the game and have played in college. And so, yeah, we won the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame golf tournament representing the Oklahoma Golf Association out at National. So off to a great start, I think.
Yes.
So 26 years as a federal government employee, 3 of those in the DEA. Most people look at your bio. You're very involved, lead FBI agent at Waco and the Oklahoma City bombing, which is 30 years this year. Played golf at Baylor. There's so many things that we can talk about, and we could sit here for days to tell all your stories. You've done many documentaries across big TV networks that people can go see. But I want to dive into more of like your personal story, and obviously grew up in Texas, came to Oklahoma, and there's a lot to uncover. So where were you born and raised?
I was born in Houston, Texas, and at the age of 4, though, we moved to Del Rio, Texas, which is a border town. Okay. Where you'll see it on the news regularly, where it's a lot of the crossings are taking place of illegals. Still have family there. I still have a brother and have a niece and a few other relatives that live there in Del Rio. It's a beautiful little town, Mexican border town. It has more of a Hispanic flavor than American, but it was a great place to grow up.
Yeah, ranch in town.
ranching town.
Yeah, horses, cattle.
A lot of ranchers that
Okay.
live there. It was not a cattle place. It's semi-desert.
Okay.
It used to be the sheep and mohair capital of the world.
Yeah.
And then a lot of that moved to Australia. So they still do raise a lot of sheep there, but not like what it used to be.
Yeah. So you went through high school there as well?
Yeah. Graduated high school, 1962.
Yeah. So you're in Del Rio, you're growing up. It's probably really hot down there. There's a lot of things going on.
Yeah, we were real happy because we'd make the national news. They'd give the hottest place in America. And at least 4 or 5 times a year, we'd be the hottest place in America. So,
What moved your family, dad and mum, to Del Rio?
my dad was in construction. He did mainly heavy construction and moved all around the country. And his brother was trained there as an airplane pilot in World War II. And his brother went back to Del Rio. It's a Laughlin Air Force Base is there. And they had a huge hailstorm that occurred in Del Rio in 1949. And his brother called him and said, if you ever want to go into business for yourself, now's the time, because almost the whole town was pretty much destroyed. So he moved there to get into the construction business, and we ended up, staying there.
Yeah. What's your earliest golf memories? You obviously played golf in college.
Well, I like everybody else, I started young at times. My dad loved golf. He took it up late because he was, really working all the time. But in his 30s, he started playing. And he tried to force me into it, which is absolutely the wrong thing to do. And so I tinkered with it when I was, like 10 and 11. And then I hated it because I wanted to play football and baseball. But I went back to it when I was about 13 and 14.
Okay.
And had a little bit of early success, and that's what, most kids, if they can see some potential. So I started playing and had won a few tournaments, junior tournaments and stuff like that. And so I kept doing it.
Yeah. What was what was it that made you better at golf than you were at football and baseball?
Well, I was a 5'3" tight end and weighed 130 pounds, and I just didn't see there was going to be a big future. I was slow, and didn't look like there was much of a future in football. I like playing football. I like hitting, but obviously I knew I had a better chance in golf. We came in. My team, we came in 3rd in state my junior year and 2nd in state in my senior year, and I won district, and so I knew there was a chance of maybe even playing at a higher level.
Yeah. Did you have any, what were the best parts of your game when you look back at your high school game?
Best part of my game was short game.
Okay.
I was not to brag because we all know what our capabilities are, but I was a terrific putter and chipper.
Yeah, I saw it in action. I've seen it, and you can still do that. Yeah,
I used to drive people crazy because I could chip in just so many times. And played a lot of match play. It's just a killer when you just played the whole so much better than somebody else, and all of a sudden they chip in on you. Yeah, it's just murder.
It's the best.
Yeah.
So you're playing high school golf, you're winning, you're having success, you're in Del Rio, it's really hot. Take me to that time in your life. Are you thinking, Dad obviously has a huge passion for golf, so he would love to see you pursue a career in it, maybe go to college. Yeah. Was that a heavy influence in how you go to Baylor? Did you have other opportunities? Did you even think that you want to play golf in college?
I wasn't sure I would play golf, but we used to play a tournament called the Border Olympics in Laredo, Texas. And it was a great tournament because college and high school played together. And all of the better teams, University of Houston, most of the Southwest Conference teams back then, they played. And we were playing the same course, same tees. And so I could do a comparison of where I stood with specific teams. And in all honesty, Baylor wasn't all that good at the time. So I had a good idea that I could make the team at Baylor. There wasn't a lot of scholarship help back in those days, but that wasn't as important. at the time, Baylor was a private school, still is, but tuition was $25 an hour. So an average semester was $300 to go to Baylor. So completely different than what it today. I think it's like $70,000 a year to go to Baylor. So a little bit different than what it was back then.
Yeah.
But I had narrowed it down to it was Southwest Texas State Teachers College back then. It's now Texas State, and I had a lot of friends that went there. It was known as a party school, and so I'd kind of narrowed it down to Baylor and Southwest Texas State. And my dad said, "You're not going there. You're going to Baylor." So he made the final decision for me.
Is it San Marcos?
San
Texas
Marcos.
State?
Yeah, beautiful little town, and it's a real still a party school.
I would assume so, because based on the guy that I know that is there or went there, that's totally true still.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, so Dad says so you're going to Baylor.
Yeah.
What was academics like for that point? Did the family kind of stress academics as well? Or
I was the first person to go seriously to go to college. I had two older brothers. They went to San Angelo, but they went to party and as soon as they could get kicked out, that was basically when they went. So I think they both went like one semester or 2 semesters, and then they dropped out. So, but I went with the intention of pursuing a degree, and I'd had a little success in high school, and wasn't sure. Kind of started pre-med like a lot of people, but that turned out trying to play golf and doing that was overwhelming. So I ended up majoring in accounting, which was still pretty tough because of the demands of the workload. But majored in accounting and minored in economics at Baylor.
Do you remember your set of golf clubs you had through college?
They varied, but consistently the ones that I ended up with that I played the most, my irons were Arnold Palmer's. And I had a beautiful set of McGregor Tourney Silver Scots. They're most I'm trying to, for some reason, I'm drawing a blank on he had won the Masters. He was head pro down at Champions, and took a lesson from his brother Jay. I think he just passed away. He's famous golfer, but McGregor every year would send him like 20 sets, because back in those days nothing was matched, and he would go through those 20 sets and would put together a set of irons for himself each year. And so I bought an offset of his, and probably they're worth thousands of dollars now if I'd kept them, but I couldn't play with them. And the Arnold Palmers were actually a cheap brand back then, but for some reason they fit my eye and I could hit them solid. So that was the most important thing. Yeah. And I used a McGregor Tourney Iomatic, which had about 5 degrees of loft on it, because you played in the wind and hard pan, and you need to hit it out there and let it roll.
Were you a tinkerer with the putter, or do you keep it consistent putting?
I pretty much used a Arnold Palmer, which it was chrome plated, similar to the putter that Palmer would use, although his was usually darker in color. But I used that for years. Yeah. It had a little sweet spot. I used the old Bullseye, which had a sweet spot about the size of a pinhead.
Yeah, it did. But it still does. Yeah.
But when you hit it solid, there was nothing that felt as good as when you hit that thing right on the sweet spot. Yeah. It was unusual. But the Arnold Palmer actually, to me, had a little larger sweet spot. It had one about the size of a dime. So to me, it had a better feel.
Yeah. How was your time at Baylor playing golf there? Did you win any golf tournaments? Do you have any favorites?
We ended up winning the Southwest Conference, which we hadn't done in 40 years, and they didn't win it again for 40 years. I I was captain of the team my junior year when I was all Southwest Conference. My senior year, I played number 1 my junior year. I came back. I had a fellow on my team, Jim Grant, who made All-American, and he beat me out. His dad had cancer, and he had to drop out for a year, but he came back. And then we also recruited a young man named Rick Rogers, who Bill Rogers was his brother. Bill was player of the year on the PGA in 1982, and Rick was a really good player. Ended up being a club pro for his career. He just passed away here recently, and he beat me out my senior year. So now I've dropped from 1 to 3, and a kind of a funny story was we started off and we were favored to win because we were strong, and we started off slow. Back then, we played everybody head up matches. It was for 6 points.
Yeah.
Every team in the conference.
Yeah.
And we started off slow, and I was not playing well. And the coach approached me and said, "Bob, you're playing like you know what?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm sorry. I thought he was going to demote me down to the 4th spot." He said, "You can't stand being 3rd, can you?" I said, "I'm trying as hard as I can, Coach. No, I'll be all right." And he said, "Nah." He said, "You can't play there, can you?" He said, "I'm going to move you up to 2. So what we did was we played for 6 points. We played 4 individual matches and 2 team matches. And my partner and I, after I moved up to number 2 again, we never lost another match. And we were potent together.
Yeah. God, what, I mean, I'd love to go back to those days, right? Playing match play against the guys.
It was so much fun.
You know, you traveling around.
You
Great
miss a lot of school because we'd get there the day before, play a practice round, and then you'd have to play. And so you're going to miss usually 2 days of school there. And I think we had 9 schools in the conference, something like that.
Okay.
But, you know, we had Texas A&M, Arkansas, Texas Tech, Rice, SMU, TCU, Baylor. It was great conference because we could drive to every one of those schools. Now they've got everything so messed up. It's sad what they've done to sports. It really is.
And some of these teams are flying. You know, they're jumping on planes. Golf teams are jumping on planes to go play in
Oh,
Hawaii.
we didn't.
No.
The furthest we went was to Albuquerque. We played it was called the Tucker, and I think they still play it.
Okay.
Which was they had all the better schools played there, and we'd go to the Border Olympics that I talked back in Laredo, and our big college tournament back then was the All-American Intercollegiate in Houston. Houston put it on. Houston was the best team in the country. They would recruit 30 people in a year, and they'd give them books so they could say they were on scholarship at Houston, and then they'd weed them out. I mean, you could be there if you could make it, but they had a lot of touring pros. Faldo was there for a semester. Players like that would come in from
Monty
all over.
from Monty.
What's that?
Colin Montgomery was a Houston guy.
No,
right?
he actually
Or
was
not?
Houston Baptist.
Houston Baptist. That's
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was not all that good a player
Couples.
until Couples played at
was
Houston. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're good now. They've
Yeah.
always kind of been good, but that's.
But not like where they were back in those days.
They recruited 30 guys, gave them books, and then
Yeah.
whittled it down to their top guys.
I had one funny story. I had a fellow that I played high school golf with named Hal Underwood, and he won the state junior, and he was number 1 ranked. Ended up being number 1 ranked amateur in the country. It was one Easter after I had already graduated, and he was 2 years behind me, so I went and watched him play at the All-American, and he ended up winning it, and so we had a big celebration, and his coach came to me afterwards, and they were playing a tournament the next day in a little town in mid-Texas. And he said, if you want to play, he said, just come in. I'll tell them you're one of the students at Houston, and they won't know the difference because you're a decent player. And And then all of a sudden I'm playing, and all of a sudden I get hot. I get like 5 under par, and it looks like I'm going to win the tournament.
I'm kidding from Houston.
And it's all Houston players, but I'm not even a Houston player.
Oh, that's
And
brilliant.
all of a sudden the coach is following me. Okay, how you doing? I said, well, I'm still 5 under. But John Mahaffey was on the team then.
Okay.
And he, for those who don't know, he ended up winning a number of majors and was a heck of a player. But he ended up shooting 6 under and nudged me by a stroke. But I almost won their tournament.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's the days you least expect it, right?
Yeah.
You know,
All
and
of a
you
sudden-
make a few putts.
All of a sudden,
and
you just a couple of putts go in, and all of a sudden the driver is just
Yeah.
hitting it right where you want it.
So when you went to Baylor, you decided, do you think you're going to go to pre-med, and then you switched to accounting. You also said earlier that you were going to get a degree. So you really were thinking about after, as far as like a career versus
Right.
like trying to play golf and like
Yeah.
being a club pro. You were thinking, I want to go out
Yeah.
into the quote business world.
Right.
How was the accounting degree alongside your golf? Was a lot easier than, not easier, but a lot, obviously less time consuming than
Less time
pre-med.
consuming, but still there was a lot of workload. And some of the professors were demanding. I had one that demanded that I submit my work. It had to be postmarked, because I would miss over a month of school
Yeah.
in the spring.
Yeah.
That when an assignment was due, it had to be postmarked on that date. So I'm doing, general ledgers and stuff, while others are maybe not
having a great time
having a
somewhere
good
else.
time. Yeah. So sometimes I'd get tied up with that.
Yeah.
But so it was okay though, because I mean I had to do the work. The work had to be done. But I still I learned that was not what I wanted as a career. I had a couple of job offers afterwards, and I said, I don't really want to be an accountant. And so I went to law school.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
that kind of when you decided to go pre-med, were you thinking that also could get me into law school
No.
early on, or were you thinking like I want to be a doctor as well before that?
No, I had not really thought about law school until toward the end. I had the fellow I said that was All-American. He ended up going to law school, and he was a year older than me. And so I started looking at it, and the law school's right there at Waco. It's
Okay.
right on campus. And the more I looked at it, the more that it appealed to me. I liked what a law degree would do for me.
Yeah. You said so. Dad was in construction. Your
Right.
uncle was Air Force. Did your dad?
Well, he
serve
and my
before that?
uncle went in the furniture business. He had a furniture
Okay.
store in Del Rio.
Okay. What did Mum do?
Mom helped with the books and helped with the business.
So you had the entrepreneurial experience through your family,
Yeah.
as well as
Yeah, my dad expected that I was probably going to come back and work in the business. He built, I think it was supposedly like 300 homes that he built during his career. He had a lumber yard. He had a furniture store himself. He would do different businesses from time to time. He was they were both, he and my uncle were both entrepreneurs, which is, they had no formal education. They right out of high school. So really amazing how well that they did. Not that we were super rich, but with really nothing, how they were able to make a good living for themselves.
Did your brothers go back to the business?
My brothers both did work
Okay.
for my dad, and then had their own businesses.
Yeah. So you go to law school, following, a friend and teammate as well into law school, seeing that happen. Do you think I'm going to go into, did you understand, or do you think what specific type of law you were going into at that point? Was law enforcement
No.
even on the table?
No, law enforcement was far away
Yeah.
from any thought that I had. The unusual thing, though, was that there was an FBI agent that was stationed in Del Rio when I was growing up. And then he got transferred to Waco. And he liked to play golf, and he would come out and watch me play matches and stuff. And when I was about a year into law school, he approached me and said that it would help him out if I filled out an application, because he was supposed to have so many applications submitted, recruit so many people. And I wasn't even thinking about being an FBI agent, but I went ahead and filled out the application just to kind of help him out. But at the same time, this was at the height of the Vietnam War. This is now, when I'm getting ready to graduate, it's 1969. And so I had signed up to be in the airborne. I was going to be a paratrooper in the Army, part of the National Guard. And all of a sudden they changed the law. I was on top of the seniority list and was supposed to go in, but politicians changed the laws to get somebody, some relative or some donor in. And they flipped the seniority list. So all of a sudden now I was at the top and I now flipped to the bottom, which made no sense. And they only did it for like 2 months. But I was faced with, I had to decide, was I going to be inducted in the military? I was offered a commission as a JAG officer, as a lawyer in the Army. I was also, I did fairly well in school. I was offered a clerkship for the Texas Supreme Court, which surprisingly gave a deferment. But I said, I don't think I could explain that to my kids. What'd you do in the war, Daddy? I was a clerk for the court. And then he told me that the FBI was hiring. And so he went ahead and my application was now being, usually takes that long, about a year. So he went and checked where I stood. And so it was down, I was really close to signing that commission as a JAG officer. And he said, no, give me 1 more week. And I think there's a chance that you're going to get in. So I had just taken the bar exam, just had my son was born, all within 2 weeks. And then he says, you've got a reporting date of July 14th, 1969, which was in 2 weeks. So all of a sudden I go from not knowing whether I'm going to Vietnam or, so I end up in the FBI. I had to sign a 3-year contract with them. And so I figured I'd do the 3 years and then come back and practice law.
That must have been such an emotional time of your life. Your son's about to be born or being born. You don't know if you're going to war or not.
He was born June 21. And I took the bar like 3 days before he was born.
Oh my gosh.
And then I had to report to the FBI July 14.
And you're 24, 25 at this point?
I was 24.
Yeah. Wow. what a couple of months to deal with, right?
Yeah.
What was kind of like the media landscape around Vietnam at that point, especially in Texas, and obviously family is thinking, are you going? And also your decision too.
I wanted to serve. I was in Air Force ROTC, so I had served there. So I wasn't that I was anti-military. I was going to do some type of service. I'd signed, like I said, I'd signed up for the National Guard, but it was not a good time for the military. The demonstrations, people were coming back from Vietnam, were getting spat upon, and they were not being supported. It was really a sad time in our country because the kids did nothing wrong. I mean, in fact, they put their life on the line, and they were treated like dirt when they came back. So it was a sad period of time.
How'd you meet your wife?
I've been married twice. My first wife was from Del Rio. Met her in high school, and moved. It's a tough life early on. Moved like 14 times, and it ended up in a divorce. And my present wife, we've been married over 40 years now. We met back in D.C. She was from Maryland and was working for the FBI. We met back there after I got a divorce.
So you get your report date. Your son's born, and you're like, in a couple of weeks, I've got to go. Where do you have to report to?
I had to go July 14 to Quantico, Virginia.
Oh wow!
We actually report first to Washington D.C. I had to report. They called it the old post office. Well, I'm walking on the street, and there's the post office. And I asked somebody there, "Is this the old post office?" That said, "Well, it was built in 1920, I guess it was, but that was the wrong place."
Not old enough.
The old post office was built in like 1800, 1890 or something. It actually got turned into a hotel by Trump, became Trump International. He sold it, and now he's trying to rebuy it back again. But that's where we did most of our instruction then, was on like the 5th floor of the old post office, where we actually had an FBI office in there in that old post office, and had classrooms inside of that. And then we did our firearms training and physical fitness and defensive tactics and down in Quantico. But Quantico was not like now. Now they have, it's like a community college almost. They have dormitories and classrooms, and it's on the military base at Quantico. But then it was just a small building and didn't have room to stay there for long periods of time.
Yeah. You grew up in Texas. I assume you had experience shooting something before you got there at 24 years old.
Yeah. Of course, most of the training there was with pistols. We used revolvers back in those days. Had 6 shots.
Heavier?
What's that?
Were they heavier to like hold, or
not really heavier.
About the same.
It was a Model 10 Smith & Wesson military police. I still remember it. It was funny because you had 2 groups. You had guys that were really good, and then you had the guys that were really bad, and then you had the guys in the middle, and they didn't care about us. I mean, I was not setting any records, but there's no trouble. So I didn't get refined a lot. The guys that had a chance to shoot perfect scores, they really wanted them to do that. And the guys that couldn't hit a target, that's where they spent all their time working with them. Yeah. So, but I did okay. I was all right. I was fast.
Yeah.
We actually had, I'm sure they don't do it now because it was dangerous as heck. We did duels where they had these mechanical targets, and we would have another guy beside me, and we would walk side by side, and the target would turn, and we'd have to quick draw and hit the target. And when you hit it, the alarm would go off. And so then you'd go, and you had to do this 3 times, and you only had 6 shots. So you had to hit the target with usually 1 shot. But I ended up winning the whole class. So I was the fastest draw in the class, which is, I might not have been the most accurate, but I could hit the target. And I was, but I was the fastest, which was cool.
From the hip as well. Really
from the
quick,
hip.
From the whole
stuff. But now I'm afraid that I know they don't do it anymore, because you could pull it out and shoot yourself in the leg if you get it too fast. But that was really fun because you're good at it. It's fun when you're good at something.
Yeah, definitely. When was the last time you shot? Like, just for fun?
I still have to qualify as a former police officer.
Okay.
And because I have a little more authority, but in some ways I think it's less authority than an average citizen. A citizen, you don't even have to get a license. You can just strap on a gun. But if I'm acting as an ex-law enforcement officer, I have to qualify every year.
Okay.
So I went out about a month ago, and we have our ex-FBI people. We get together and we shoot and requalify every year.
Okay. Do you have any competition? There has to be competition among the guys to just who can still do it.
There's some of them are getting old.
Yeah.
And so you're worried, okay, are now the census going to be such that you're not going to qualify? That's what the pressure is. But it's still, it would have been really easy back in the old days, but it's getting a little more difficult, you know, just your sight and perception and stuff.
Well, what is the test?
What is the test?
What are the certain drills you've got to do in the test?
We go to a firing range, and this one we went over to a firing range in Yukon. I think Big Big Boy Sports or something like that.
So it's indoor.
Big Boy Guns. It's indoors. Okay. Now, sometimes we shoot outdoors. There's a range over in El Reno that we go to. The instructor also has some property down south of Norman. We've gone down there and shot on his property. But usually for the quals, we'll do it indoors. It's just easier to control. And it's the qualification test is like 30 rounds at various ranges. It goes out to like 25 yards or so. And you have to have, I think it's like 25 out of the 30, something like that to qualify.
Yeah. So it's not easy.
No, you've got to be on your game.
Wow. I didn't expect you to say that. That's great.
Yeah.
It makes sense though. I mean, being, I guess, held to a certain standard,
Yeah.
you know, with
well, we can, supposedly, some people would object, we can still take a concealed weapon in certain places where they have it posted that you're not supposed to have a weapon in there. So we have certain rights like a law enforcement officer. We're ex-law enforcement. And now we have authority that in most of the states, they allow us to carry concealed weapons also.
Okay. So you go to Quantico, you go through your training.
Yeah.
You're very good at quick draw with your revolver. What are you thinking at that point? You're looking back, you're like, I have a newborn son. I'm now in the FBI.
Right.
I mean, you're 24, 25 years old.
Yeah. I'm 24. When I get through with Quantico, my birthday's in October, so I turned 25. I get transferred. I'm there about 20 weeks at Quantico in Washington, D.C. I get transferred to Sacramento, California, and I'm just doing general investigative work. And I learned right away that the federal government is different. We used to say there's the right way, the wrong way, and then the government way. And there's nothing that could be more true than that. I left when I got transferred to Sacramento. I left as soon as that Friday night. They gave us like little candy and cookies and Cokes or something, and then we graduated, and then don't shoot anybody on the way there. Yeah. And so I immediately left. But when you travel, you don't have to. When you're transferred, you don't have to travel on weekends. Well, I did. I wanted to get there. Yeah. So I left that Friday night. I drove to Knoxville. Then I got up the next morning, and I think I drove to Del Rio, or I think I went all the way there from Knoxville. And I had to load up my furniture and had to pick up my wife and my new son. And then we drove from there to Sacramento. And because of the 2 days that I took in Del Rio to load up the furniture, they counted those days that were not official days. And so I arrived in Sacramento like 5 days later. And I have guys that come 2 days after me, and they had to take no leave because they didn't travel on the weekends. I travel on the weekends, but when I got there during the middle of the week to get furniture and get my wife and get my son, they said, you're going to have to take 2 days of annual leave. I said, they got here 2 days after me, and they don't have to take leave? No, because they didn't travel on weekends. Yeah. You traveled on weekends, but you didn't have to. I said, that makes no sense. They said, it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not. Right, yeah,
so that's true.
That was my introduction to the federal government and some of their systems. So unusual. Yeah. But it's okay. You have to learn those things. But anyway, I get transferred to Sacramento, and I knew that it was going to be temporary because I was going to be sent to a smaller office, which is what they normally would do. Initially, I got orders from Sacramento. It was supposed to be within 30 days to Bakersfield, California. A guy that had been in my training school, he approached me, said he had an aunt that lived in Bakersfield. Would I switch with him? He had orders to Yuba City, California. I said, I don't care about either one of them.
Okay.
I said, it's fine with me. So I ended up going to Yuba City, California, which was great. So Yuba City is 50 miles north of Sacramento.
Okay.
And I covered 3 counties, had one other agent there. We had 2 agents for 3 counties. We had Yuba, Sutter, and Colusa counties, which are northern California. Beautiful country. It's rice farming and mountains. Not too far from Lake Tahoe, about 90 miles to Lake Tahoe. So really, really good spot.
Yeah.
The agent in charge, named John Williams, just a great guy, one of the most super guys I've ever met. He loved golf, and he found out that I'd played Baylor. So every Saturday morning, we would have the first tee-off time. We had the guy in the highway patrol that worked there in Sacramento, and he would get us the first tee-off time at Ansel Hoffman, which was a nice public course. And we played every Saturday. And I played with the boss every Saturday morning, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Not the usual at all.
Right.
Because
Golf's
when
the greatest
I
sport in the
got
world.
transferred to Los Angeles after that, the boss there was the biggest jerk in the world.
Not a golfer.
Well, I don't know if he golfed or not. He didn't like agents at all. In fact, he's the only one that I know that got blackballed to the Ex-Agents Association.
Oh, wow.
Still never got in. Just a jerk. So we had our jerks in the FBI as well. So I mean, I got a kind of the wrong perception of things, but it was a great year because he was just a super guy.
Yeah.
In fact, he said John Williams. He said he had been transferred 33 times in his FBI career. He said, you ought to just go back and practice law. Said, I know you'll be a good agent, but said it's a tough life and tough on family.
Yeah.
And but I still stuck it out.
Yeah. What was the scope of just kind of like your day-to-day, what you're doing? You know, obviously you're covering 3 counties and doing.
Yeah, you back in those days we had more cases. Now, a case can be just like doing a background on an applicant or a presidential appointee, or going out and interviewing relatives, but it's any federal case that occurs in those counties, and we covered them all then. So I'd have about 100 cases going at one time. You feel like almost like a door-to-door salesman, because you're plotting your day, and you're in the car constantly, and you may be doing a background investigation. You may have a guy wanted for murder. You may have leads on kidnapping cases. You may have a bank robbery going on. You had draft dodgers back in those days that you're looking for. We were primarily responsible for all federal fugitives back then.
Okay.
The FBI has given those up to a large degree. The U.S. Marshals does most of those now, but back then the U.S. Marshals didn't do that. We did all of that. So we had a lot of fugitives that we were looking for too. Yeah. And a lot of times we're just by ourselves out there looking for them. Now they got big SWAT teams that go in and do those things. But you're going out and knocking on doors, don't know what's behind that door.
Oh my gosh. Any close calls over your career?
I've had situations where I've had bullets go over my head. I've had knives pulled on me.
Yeah.
I've had to settle people down with a gun to their heads, which usually calms them down. But I've had some close encounters.
Yeah. I mean, for the career, the length of the career that you've had, and obviously stepping into being a police chief at Edmond, I'm not surprised there's been at least a few. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So you go to California for a guy who clearly isn't very happy with life or the world at that point, and doesn't like golf, or you never find out if he plays golf. Where do you go from LA?
Well, I was in LA, and I was working. It was mainly what you'd call domestic security back in those days, but domestic terrorism now we call it. It was white extremists and black extremists and everything in between, from Ku Klux Klan's, neo-Nazi, Black Panther Party, those types of groups. I had informants that were there, but worked mainly in Compton, Watts, the worst places of LA. And I was pretty good at developing informants. And then we had a case in Riverside there were a number of cases like that around the country that were happening in the early 70s, where there was a burglary call, and they lured police officers in there, and they ambushed and executed 2 police officers.
Oh my gosh.
So they ended up sending me out to Riverside to help out with that investigation.
Yeah.
So I got transferred, which was a good thing, because there was almost no way to play golf in LA. Everything was so expensive. I went to Rancho Park one day. I was working a wiretap, and which I thought, this is going to be great. I worked till like 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and then I'd have the mornings off, and then report back at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But I went to Rancho Park, took a number, waited 3 hours, and they called my number, and after 3 hours, I'd played 9 holes. I said, "This is awful."
Yeah.
So no, but in Riverside, I was actually able, when I went out there, I was actually able to join a small little country club. It cost $100 to join, and the dues were $25 a month.
Miss those days. Yeah.
So that was pretty good.
Oh wow. Okay. So how early on, I guess, is your FBI career before you go to Riverside, and then how do you start climbing the ladder and growing up leadership? Obviously, you're good at what you do with investigating and going through so many cases and being organized too.
Yeah, had some substantial cases in California, but my career progression started when I get called. They're starting to bring more lawyers back to headquarters. There's more lawsuits that are taking place. There's a Freedom of Information Act, which is now causing our records to have to be reviewed, and all those have to be reviewed by an attorney before they go out. But I get a call saying that I was going to be transferred asking me if I would, did I want to be transferred to the legal counsel division. I said, not really.
Sit behind a desk all day.
but they said, well, if you don't do that, you're going to probably be assigned to the Freedom of Information Unit, which you'll just be reviewing files all day. And I said, okay, I'll do the legal counsel division. So I went back to Washington, D.C. in the legal counsel division for 3 years, kind of handling anything that came up, just like a corporate attorney for an agency. And it was during that time that I developed an expertise for undercover operations. I handled all the new undercover operations that went into effect. I did all the incorporations for them. I got at one point, we had some issues that came up, and the director told me that I had to train every undercover agent in the FBI. So I had to bring them all back to D.C. to train them as to what they could do, what they couldn't do. And I ended up with a number of the major operations. And after a period of time, we were supposed to go back and be supervisors in the field. So my time was there. Initially, I was told, you're going to get to go back to your home area, which this is great. I'm going to go back to Texas. But I said, I'm flexible. I said, you can give me the Southeast, the Southwest, or the West. That's where I felt most comfortable. And they said, okay, no problem. So I get the word I'm going to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I said, well, not too bad. Yeah. Close to Texas.
Close, yeah.
And but then I get my official orders. They're Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Oh.
And I said, that's not Texas. So what had happened was there was this undercover operation in Washington, D.C. that had gone terribly bad.
Yeah.
It was the most expensive one. At the time, they'd invested over $1 million in it, and it was a total bust. Yeah. And they said, well, since you're this expert, we really want you to go over and bail this thing out and take it over. And I said, no. Initially, I said, I'm going home. No, I'm not going to do it. And they said, now what do you think about going to D.C. that you have orders to Harrisburg? I said, you got me. Yeah. So I go to this, take over this undercover operation.
Yeah.
And I took that case, and I had been working on another case in New York, helped them get that started. And it started off as just an art theft and securities theft type investigation, but it turned out that politicians all of a sudden, because they represented that they had huge sums of money to buy stolen art, to buy securities and so forth, and all of a sudden politicians started showing up wanting some of that money, and it became a case called Abscam. I had this undercover operation I had in D.C. They were renting 2 homes in Georgetown, had a construction company that were building projects in D.C. And so I ended up merging those 2 together. And as a result of that operation, we convicted 6 congressmen and 1 U.S. senator.
Wow.
And it was the largest public corruption case the FBI ever had. So I had to testify before Congress 6 times on that particular case, but got a lot of notoriety. I spent a lot of time with the director. He knew that was his career was on the line, and I had a period there for about 6 weeks. I had breakfast with him every day and had to go over. I actually knew the case better than anybody. I'd go over the case with him and fill him out on details, because it was, if it didn't go well, it would be the end of his career.
Yeah.
But he did well, and the case went through all the appellate processes, and all the cases were sustained. So I ended up with 2 of the congressmen that we prosecuted in D.C. The others were prosecuted in New York, Eastern District, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. But it was a big case.
Yeah. And
from after that case, I got transferred back to D.C. As a special assistant, really the lawyer for the assistant director in the criminal division, which handles all the criminal cases and all the terrorism cases in the FBI. And but after about 6 months there, we were supposed to integrate DEA into the FBI. We were going to form just one agency, because there's just total duplication. Drugs are in every investigation we have.
Yeah.
It still makes no sense to me that we have 2 separate agencies, but that's not for me to say. But I was sent over there to integrate the DEA and the FBI, so I had to rewrite all the laws that would make them the same standing as we had. There were variances. They had civil service protection. We did not. We were at-will employees in the FBI. I don't know where they are now. They're talking about firing people. Can they do that? In my day, they could just say, you're gone, and you were gone. You had no protection. So, but anyway, I became chief counsel for the DEA. I had 20-something lawyers that worked for me. And I did that for 3 years, which was a great job. I mean, a lot of people would have killed for that kind of job. I was the 4th ranking officer in DEA.
Oh, wow.
And but I said I didn't sign up to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And so I asked the director if I could go back to the FBI.
Yeah.
And so I got transferred to Newark, New Jersey, as the assistant agent in charge in New Jersey. And got back in the FBI.
Who was the FBI director?
William Webster.
Okay.
He was, I know Hoover is controversial, but Hoover did more to professionalize not only the FBI, but local law enforcement than probably any person in the history of the United States. And to me, William Webster was the second best director, if not the best director. He was a federal judge, very bright, and surrounded himself with good people. He had his deputy director when he first came in was a fellow by the name of Jim Adams, who was from Texas and a Baylor graduate. And the reason I like Jim, he's a very bright guy. He actually was a state legislator before he came in the FBI and a Baylor Law School graduate. But it necessarily, he would call me up directly for legal opinions instead of going through the chain of command. Now, my boss didn't like that.
I'm sure.
But he and I got along great. He was a super guy, real bright guy. Like dealing with him. But anyway, I thought the FBI during that period of time when Webster was there, to me was clicking in probably doing some of its best work that it's ever done. And I think our reputation was as high as it's ever been. Unfortunately, that's not the case right now.
Yeah. So you go to New Jersey. What year are you in New Jersey?
New Jersey, I get transferred there in 1984.
Okay.
And New Jersey is a large field office, comparatively speaking, not as large as LA, but it's a good sized field office, good sized field office. And there are 2 assistant agents in charge, and we divided up responsibility. The one assistant had organized crime, and I had pretty much everything else: public corruption, counterterrorism, which was a big deal. We were having, in that time period, which most people don't even realize, we were averaging about 100 bombings a year by terrorist groups. They bombed the Capitol. They were bombing in New Jersey, corporate offices. We ended up, we were having trouble with the state police at the time, New Jersey State Police. Good organization, but we would show up at a crime scene at a bombing, and they would scoop up remnants or parts of it, and we would get parts of it, and it's no way to do an investigation. So I approached the head of the state police named Clinton Pagano, who was a good Italian guy.
Right, yeah.
But it turned out we were having trouble with them because of we had a civil rights case going against one of their troopers, and we were getting our cars towed, getting speeding tickets, and they were angry at the FBI because he had told a story that really wasn't accurate. He had a guy in the back of his car that kicked out the windshield of his car. And he goes back with a flashlight and hits him and thinks he's just going to shut him up, but the guy dies.
Oh,
and so now he's panicking and comes up with this elaborate story that the guy was just flailing around and hit his radar gun. So it didn't hold water. But ended up, the story finally came out, but I got together with Clint Pagano and we formed what was called it was the second, it was a terrorism task force that we formed in the United States. New York did the first one, and we did the New Jersey terrorism task force, and we really kicked them really good. We were able to prosecute 2 major terrorist groups, and the bombings pretty much stopped after that.
It's amazing that, this is obviously in the 80s and the news, and I mean, even the generation that's growing up now, it's all on social media. It's just before their time, right? But, you're talking about how many bombings you're having. Like, there's probably not a lot of people that remember that or even know that or even didn't even
officers
know that exists,
being executed,
and
we
they
had
say
cases,
it's bad now.
Guys would, walk by and smile at the officer and shoot him in the back of the head. It literally was more violent then than now. Now we've had the massive demonstrations and the burnings and stuff like that, but the execution of officers was really worse then.
Why was there so much animosity towards officers at that point? And who were the terrorism groups?
It was left-wing groups that were intent on, they got a big leg up with the Vietnam War because you had the anti-war groups, and then they were infiltrating all of those groups. So there was this kind of animosity toward the government. So these were all Marxists that were intent on overthrowing the government. So they were using this anti-war fever that was going on, and a lot of that started really dying down when the war was over. But you still had these groups that were there. People wanted to just write them off, but they didn't go away. They were still there, but they no longer had the support of more of the bigger groups that were supporting the anti-war, and the people couldn't distinguish between anti-war groups and the groups that wanted to overthrow the government.
Yeah, that makes your job really difficult
Yeah.
at that point, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to separate. I mean, people doing bad things are still people doing bad things.
Yeah.
But you got to go in there and figure out where it's coming from.
Yeah.
How long were you in New Jersey for?
2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So till 86, 87, not that long.
In 1986.
Yeah.
I got married again in 84, and then got transferred back to D.C. I was sent back to a group. I was in charge of civil rights, all the civil rights investigations for the FBI throughout the United States, and presidential backgrounds.
Okay.
So like what's going on right now, all the cabinet level appointees, we do the background investigations on those. Supreme Court appointments, all of those high level government officials, we would do all the background investigations on those, and then all the civil rights investigations.
Busy job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anyone any days you remember that stand out? Anybody that you looked up to and just thought that, I mean, he's, maybe not as far as like someone in the government that you represent or work with or work for, but people in general during that time you're around DC? Well,
a lot of people that you looked up to. You're the FBI. If you think about it, most of them had law degrees, accounting degrees, professional people, had gone through. They all had top secret clearances. At the time, you're talking about a professional class that they're just really top notch people, and some of those people I really respected greatly. I had, for example, my next job after that job there was I was deputy assistant director, which is the number 2 guy in the criminal division. So we did all of the all criminal investigations across the country as well as the terrorism investigations, and worked with Frank Keating at the Department of Justice. He'd come over from Treasury. He was in charge of law enforcement at Treasury, and then got elevated to the Associate Attorney General, which is the 3rd ranking member in the Department of Justice. So I had to deal with him on a number of issues, usually jurisdictional issues about who had authority, FBI, U.S. Marshals. Sometimes you get ATF that would try to get their nose in our business, and we'd have to sort it out through the Department of Justice, but had good working relationships with him. And what was good about Frank Keating was he had a background and understood law enforcement. He was a former FBI agent. He was in charge at Treasury over the law enforcement function. He had been a United States attorney in Tulsa. So he understood the different agencies, what their responsibilities were. So a lot of times you had bureaucrats that would be put in these positions with absolutely no background at all. Some came from law professors and things of that nature who taught on a theoretical basis, but really had no practical knowledge. So it was refreshing to have somebody like him.
Did you play more golf the more seniority you had? Did you have more time to play golf on Saturdays?
Less and less.
Less and less?
Yeah.
There's no golf simulators back then you're having in your house, right?
Right.
What were some of your favorite courses in DC? Did you get a chance to play a few?
The first couple of years there, I was able to join a course called Fairfax Country Club, which was really a great little course. I didn't get to play any of the real good ones. I didn't get to play Congressional. Played Avenel, which they played. They played a PGA tournament there a number of years there. They moved Congressional to Avenel for a number of years. I I'm trying to think of some other ones. We played military courses, Fort Belvoir. We would sometimes travel down to Williamsburg. There were some good courses down there, but didn't have the money to play the real nice courses.
Yeah. And any other sticks that played golf with you, that played college golf in the Bureau? You guys have a good group when you did have time to play?
I don't think anybody that I played with on a I had one fellow named Rodney, who was a good stick. He was what we called a clerical employee. You're either an agent or a clerk, but it's not the right way to describe people, because a lot of them are professional employees also. Yeah. But he was a good stick. Okay. He was a different character, had a full beard and long hair. He didn't look like an agent.
He fit in undercover sometimes, though, right, if he needed to, but he didn't need to. So how do we fast forward from DC to you end up back in Texas at some point, right?
No.
No? No. Never. So they just fly you in when Waco happens from DC?
Well, I drove.
Oh, you drove.
But yeah. I got transferred to Oklahoma.
Oh, before. Oh, okay.
Before that.
Okay.
I had asked to go to San Antonio. Mm-hmm. It was open. And after I'd been 3 years there as the deputy assistant director, it was time to new job.
Yeah.
And but they said, well, you can't go now because we're getting a new assistant director and you're going to have to train him. I said, well, that's great.
Great. Babysit the new help.
Yeah. And so after about, I don't know, a few months, I said, is he trained yet? And they said, yeah. So Oklahoma City opened up, and I knew nothing about Oklahoma or Oklahoma City, but it's close to Texas and Southwest. Yeah. So I got transferred as the agent in charge of Oklahoma City. So when Waco occurred, Waco is in the jurisdiction of San Antonio. Mm-hmm. It's out of the San Antonio division. The fellow who was in charge, the agent in charge, was a gentleman by the name of Jeff Jamar. Mm-hmm. And they asked Jeff who he would like to come in and assist in the investigation. So he asked for me. He asked for the agent in charge in New Orleans and the agent in charge from El Paso. Mm-hmm. So we all went down there. I went down that first night. Okay. Drove from here down to Waco.
Yeah. Frank wasn't governor yet at that point, but was Frank in Oklahoma City?
Frank was not governor yet.
Was he still in DC, or was he in Oklahoma City at that point in '93?
I don't know. I think he was still back in DC.
Yeah. I'm only asking to see if there's anybody that you knew in Oklahoma City.
He probably was, because he was trying to establish roots to run for governor.
Okay.
So more than likely he was probably.
But you hadn't had any connection with him while you were coming to Oklahoma City for that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was strictly a professional relationship, just at work, and not anything social. Yeah. So I really didn't know a lot of his private life and what he was doing.
How was Oklahoma City in '93 when you got here? What was that like?
It's like a ghost town.
Not what it's like now. No. 30 years later.
There's nobody on the streets. I said, where are they?
What was the kind of extent of your sort of investigation, like workload, compared to where you'd been in DC or where you'd been in LA and New Jersey?
Well, we had, at the time, you had savings and loan issue, that you had a number going into bankruptcy, and as a result, you had a lot of fraud that people were trying to salvage. Mm-hmm. And as a result, they committed a lot of fraud just trying to keep their heads above water. But unfortunately, they falsified a lot of documents in the industry. We had more savings and loan defaults in Oklahoma than any other state. We were kind of the center of that. Yeah. So big, heavy workload for that. That whole thing started here in Oklahoma. It started with Penn Square Bank, and it just kind of cascaded around the country, just kind of like a house of cards started collapsing. So a lot of that was there. We had the reputation of being a really good field office, and we still do. Mm-hmm. So I was very fortunate, had great investigators here. A lot of them that came from all over the country, but like me, wanted to get back to the Southwest. Had a number of people that had worked in New York City, but transferred into here. A lot of them from California. They came back here to Oklahoma because they wanted to be here.
Yeah.
So I was really blessed with the personnel that I had when I came in.
Yeah. So going to Waco, you drove down that first night. What do
Yeah.
you remember about that first night?
I had I got the head of my SWAT team, Chuck Choney. He's about 6'5", 250-pound Indian.
Yeah.
We call him the biggest Indian in the Bureau, and he probably was. But he was a great SWAT team leader, and I wanted him with me to go down there. We got down there about, I think, 11 o'clock that night. And first thing I did was I met up with Jeff Jamar, the head of the office. And so by this time, he had received a call from the Attorney General saying that we were going to take over, that they wanted the FBI to try to get this resolved. And so then we had to go to the ATF office. It was really a barracks that they were located in, and tell them that we were taking over from them. So we had to go look at them in the eye after they had just been shot to pieces. They had 4 of them had been killed, 16 wounded, and now we're telling them that they're no longer in charge. We are.
Yeah.
And it looked like they'd been kicked in the teeth when we had to tell them that. So
Yeah,
not
it's
a pleasant
not
experience.
a fun conversation to
No.
have, right? And
But they looked shell-shocked. I mean, you can imagine. They literally had gone into a war zone and had gotten beaten. They had to ask for a ceasefire, and then had to carry their wounded and dead out of there, in some cases in embarrassing situations.
yeah.
They could have lost a lot more, to be honest. They were fortunate they didn't lose more. You had to say fortunate, but because it was awful anyway. You lose 4 of your own.
Was that one of the kind of, obviously prior to the Oklahoma City bombing, was that one of the largest domestic issues that you had kind of dealt with as far as as far as not just yourself, but like the nation in general?
Yeah. We had the first bombing of the World Trade Center had happened just right before that. It was I can't remember exactly the date, but just a few months, because that was still going on.
Okay.
It didn't get as much exposure. It really was a powerful thing that happened at the World Trade Center, but because the building didn't come down and you didn't have that many casualties, it didn't get that much coverage. But that was a huge deal.
Yeah.
So on a terrorism level, that was probably the biggest one.
Okay.
And they tried to put this in the terrorism category, but it really wasn't terrorism. What they were doing, they were you got to put them in a whole separate category. They were true believers in their religion, but unfortunately, their religion got perverted to a point where it didn't resemble anything that a religion should resemble. And a lot of people thought it was a right-wing extremist group, but they weren't at all. I mean, over 40% in there were people of color.
Yeah.
The lead attorney was a black lawyer in there, a Harvard graduate. And they had people in there from Australia, South America, England, Israel, Hawaii, people from all over the world that had come there because they thought they had found the Messiah. And they were true believers, and he was preaching that the end of the world was coming and that he was going to usher it in, and he was the only one that could do it because he was the return of Jesus Christ. And so you had people that were true believers that were willing to die for that belief.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's plenty of media around it, TV shows, some are good, some aren't, right?
Some of them are terrible.
Some are terrible, and and unfortunately.
Yeah, at one point we had about 2,000 members of the media there. They had their own campground. They elected a mayor of the campground. They had the mayor of Waco there, they called it.
Yeah. So what was that for you personally? You were kind of being in charge of that, and was like your first big time being
Well,
in,
I wasn't in charge. Jeff Jamar was in charge. My job when I got there was I ended up primarily working with the negotiators. And Jeff on one day started off doing the media, and he asked me to do one, and he thought it went well, and I did too. And he said, "Why don't you just take over the media now?" So I ended up doing 33 national press conferences, and it would be in a room with probably around 200 members of the media that would be firing questions at me on a national scale. And you had people from Japan, Great Britain,
all over,
from all over that were there, as well as all the national media.
Yeah.
And Oklahoma media were there.
Were you there for the entirety of the whole siege?
I was there for 52 days.
Wow.
And thought I'd be there for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And I initially, my wife said, I said, she's hearing me on the phone. She knows, she understands that she's listening, and she knows I got to pack a bag. So she's packing a bag as I'm on the phone. Headquarters had called me and asked me, did I see what was on TV? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, get a bag packed, said, because AG is going to announce that we're going to be taking it over. And Jeff's asked for you to go down and give him help. So she started putting together a bag. She asked, how much should she pack for? I said, well, probably it may go up to 3 days. It could be. So usually when you have hostage standoffs, that usually 3 days is maximum that you're going to be confronted with. Most of them are over within 12 hours.
Yeah.
Because people get tired, they get hungry.
Right.
And but this wasn't the case. It turned out to be
51
days for the total standoff. Then we had to do one more final press conference before we left.
Yeah. So that happens. You're like, need a break. 52 days down there, and as far as like the kind of organization of the bureau is involved, do you just drive back to Oklahoma City and start back again? Like, is it just that's your job? That's normal to start back again on a Monday? Like, do you have to go through a process before you can start working again?
No process.
Back to work on Monday. You come back to Oklahoma City, a sleepy Oklahoma City at that point.
The bureau didn't. They acted like it. They kind of didn't want to act like it occurred. It's like you're now the black sheep of the family. Yeah. And we wanted to do after action reviews and stuff like that, and they didn't want to touch it. So it took us over a year before we could. Now there were congressional reviews, and the Department of Justice did a review, but literally that day, on the 52nd day, we did a morning press conference, went over some of the things that had happened. Just to back up a little bit, the toughest press conference that I did was I did one the morning of April 19th of the fire, announced that we were going to tear gas. And then when they started burning the place down, and it was all on fire, and we only got out like 7 or 8 of them. I was called by the bureau and said, you got to do one more. I said, what do I tell them? The place is gone.
Yeah.
They said, now you got to go back in. So I had to go back in, and you're talking all of the support people, the clerks. I mean, they're in tears. Everybody's emotionally spent and distraught. And I've got to go back and try to pull everything together and do one more press conference and describe what happened. Yeah. That was the toughest one that I had to do. So that one was extremely emotional and gut-wrenching.
Yeah. How do you process that? Like,
what you do is I started trying to get together as many facts. You tried to go from emotional to fact-based. So I immediately started talking to the hostage rescue team. That's who we had there as our super SWAT team. What did they see? What did they observe? They were hearing people saying to light it up. They actually had run inside and pulled people out that were fighting them, that wanted to go down in flames. They were being fired upon. We were shot at like 10,000 times initially, even as the fire was going on. And but still, our guys were going in and trying to rescue. They were very brave, but they were never recognized for that bravery.
Wow. So then you come back to
But
Oklahoma
I had
City.
to describe how the fire broke out. We had a plane overhead that was circling and taking pictures. And we had 3 simultaneous spots where the fires broke out. They were lit. And then we had recordings that we're able to retrieve that they had been put more fuel on it. Is it going good? And, let's get it going, keep it going. So, but still, you have stories today that claim we lit the fire.
Tear gas set things on fire and all this stuff. Yeah, whatever.
None of our tear gas was pyrotechnic. Had no ability. Now I learned a year later that there was one pyrotechnic round that was fired. There was a bunker that was just off from the main compound that was loaded with water, and they thought some of them might have gone in there and hid. So they fired a round in there. That became a big deal because I had said no pyrotechnic rounds had been fired, which is what I knew. And I challenged anybody to come up with anything that I said that was not true. And so, of course, they found that one. But I said that's all I knew to be the truth at the time. And that had nothing to do to cause any fire because it wasn't connected and it was fired into water. So but anyway, that was the only misstatement that I can find that I made during that time period.
So that's 93.
93.
And then you come back to Oklahoma City. You're based here. Where are you in your career at that point? You're obviously a pretty good career at that point. You're where are you thinking? Obviously, you've remarried, been married for almost 10 years at that point. What do you take me to that point in your life before 95 happens?
Well, I'm at a stage. I've been told I was going to go back as assistant director, and which is one of the top 10 positions in the FBI. But after Waco, that was not going to happen, which I understood, and but I still have a great job. I mean, I had preferred really to stay in this part of the country because it feels like home. Oklahoma to me is what Texas was 30 years ago. Now we're catching up.
We're getting traffic now.
Yeah, we're getting traffic. People, I said, we don't have a rush hour here. We have a rush half hour. So people have no idea what traffic is. You go through D.C., L.A., Newark, that's traffic. But it's, just people are great here. It's just a different world. The back east, people are great too, but there's kind of you got to develop a trust factor. Like I went to school at Harvard one year, and I thought I used to run, and I thought, man, this is the running capital of the world. It's going to be great. So I'm out there running on the Boston River. Hi, like a typical
smiling
Texan.
at everybody.
And they're like, this guy's crazy.
Opening doors for people. Hi, great to see you. Just really happy.
But once you get vouched for back there, like I had friends that would take me to their family, and once they, he's a good guy, and hey, come on in. You're like family. You're in the club, but there's a distrust of strangers, which is kind of understandable in some ways, but it's different. It's not. It doesn't feel like home. This has always felt like home.
Where'd you guys live when you were here?
Here?
When you were in the 90s.
I've lived in the same house for the last 35 years or whatever it is. First house we looked at out at Oak Tree, and we haven't moved. Same house.
On a golf course.
On the golf course, which is what
you didn't get to play much golf to start off, right?
No.
Yeah. So obviously it's been, it'll be 30 years this year, the Oklahoma City bombing.
Right.
There's the Oklahoma City National Memorial and Carrie and the whole team are doing their kicked off the lunch, right? 168
Right.
days towards the lunch, and they've been doing some really good things this, towards, which they do every year. It's I've run a couple of marathons around, and everyone says the same thing. Nobody does it like Oklahoma City does
Right.
it. From your perspective and the stories that you've told about that day, take me there. What happens? Where are you?
That morning, we have a charity golf tournament in Shawnee,
Yeah.
Fire Lake, I think it's called. And OSBI is putting it on, and I think it's fundraiser for Special Olympics. And so I'm paired up with the U.S. Marshal and the agent in charge of Secret Service, and all the major federal agencies are there. A lot of FBI people, a lot of local law enforcement. So it's a big tournament, and it's for a good cause.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a shotgun start at 9:00. So shotgun goes off. I think we all got a tee shot off, and then all of a sudden our pagers start going off. That's when we carried pagers in those days.
Mm-hmm.
We had mobile phones, but they were the big bricks. And so I call my secretary, and she says, so there's been some kind of a bombing down at the federal building. Don't know how bad it is, but just thought I'd let you know. And then all of a sudden, all their pagers go off too. So we're all sitting there, and we said, we better get back.
Yeah.
So,
everybody that's there needs to get to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we all get in our cars, and we're driving kind of in a caravan, all doing about 100 miles an hour. And I'm getting updates as to what's going on. And my assistant agent to me, he's as I'm driving back, he says, Bob, you know what today is, don't you? I said, what do you mean? He said, today is April 19th. I said, oh my gosh, which was the day that the fire broke out at Waco. And so my immediate reaction is that this is in retaliation for what happened at Waco. We'd been getting all kinds of threats. I had numerous death threats for a couple of years there. Some were real, some were not, just nuts, but some were serious, so I had to take them seriously. But deep down inside, I knew it was more than likely retaliation for Waco. And so I get in. I go to downtown. They by now Oklahoma City PD has cordoned off the entire downtown area and restricted access. But fortunately the officer recognizes me and waves me on through. I had another FBI agent that was with me. He wouldn't let him in.
He wouldn't let him in,
which was funny.
Yeah.
But anyway, I wasn't worried about him.
Right.
I was worried about getting there. So I went down to the bomb site and immediately reached out to Chief Sam Gonzalez and Chief Gary Mars, the chiefs of police and fire. And so we got together starting plot strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, it's a little bit different now. We were operating under what was called Presidential Decision Directive Number 2. And that was written by Ronald Reagan, which said that if there was a terrorist act, that the FBI would be in charge of not just the criminal investigation, but the overall coordination of the response to the terrorist act. So I was now, being the agent in charge, I had the initial responsibility for coordinating the response. So I had assure the fire department that I wasn't going to interfere, that the primary responsibility right now was rescue of anybody that was injured, and to to rescue as many people, save as many lives as possible, even if that might interfere with the investigation. If it came down to whether it might jeopardize evidence or the rescue was going to supersede everything that we did. But it was understood they would do everything they could to try to preserve any evidence that was there. And Chief Gonzalez and I, we worked out a plan on how we were going to coordinate our efforts. And so after that, they went to their respective command posts that they had set up. And I stood there by myself and, in front of the building, just looking there and basically just, said a prayer that I would have guidance and that justice would be obtained, for those who were killed and those who were injured and those who are going to be affected by this forever. So tried to get guidance as to how to proceed because it was so overwhelming. It was beyond anything that one person could do.
Yeah. Where were you supposed to, if you weren't playing that golf tournament, where would you have been?
I'd been in my office.
Okay.
Our offices were not in the federal building. Our offices were at 50 Penn Place.
Okay.
Which I guess it's about 5 miles or so.
Yeah, just a little bit north.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't realize until that lunch that we went to to kick off the 168 days to race day that there was a food convention going on at that point, which, in the convention center to have all these vendors, cooking food and setting up everything, and then just the amazing job that they did.
Yeah.
Right. And you've got this Oklahoma City Convention Center that,
There was also the mayor's prayer breakfast that morning.
Yeah.
There was over 1,000 people that were there in the convention center.
Yeah.
The old Cox building. In fact, they're doing that again this year. So far, they've asked me to lead off with a prayer about the bombing.
Yeah.
So probably I'll be doing that.
Was
too.
faith always a big part of your life growing up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mom and dad?
It was. Yeah, I grew up in a First Baptist Church in Del Rio, and then Baylor, of course, is a Baptist university. It's the largest Baptist university in the world. Yeah. Baylor is still faith driven, but not as I'd say strict as it was when I was there. It's moderated some, but it's still faith driven.
Yeah.
SMU and TCU are no longer. They're both secular, just like Harvard and Yale and all the others have become secular.
Yeah. How did that day kind of impact? Obviously, people know how it impacted the city, and the Oklahoma Standard comes out of that, and we have the Run to Remember and this beautiful memorial, and every time it's people listening and watching. If you haven't gone to that morning every year. And just you have to go and just experience just being there and listening to people speak and the remembrance. But how does that impact your world as far as the Bureau and everything going on? Not you personally, but just the world around you. Does it start changing things as far as processes and all this stuff? I mean, what happens in the last 30 years after that, I guess? Well,
it took me almost 10 years to go down there to the memorial. It's a tough thing to process and to deal with. And I didn't participate in the activities at first. And one reason was I was still getting death threats. And I didn't want to be there and cause something to happen. But I think time has passed now enough. So I don't participate, all the time, but I still, anytime Carrie asks me to do something, I willingly will do anything that she asks me to do. It's almost surreal what you see has happened downtown. Like I said, when I got here, it was almost a ghost town. To see it revitalized, and a lot of that Obviously, maps, big deal. But I think the bombing really brought the city together. It unified us more in a way that we really had never thought about being a unified city. And the maps and Thunder and the memorial, the members of the Thunder team, they're all required to go through the memorial. And I think they experience being part of this city. I think think they're just so fascinating. They just seem like they like each other, and they have fun playing the game, and it's fun to watch them. But I think, to me, that they kind of exemplify this city in kind of a rebirth that's taken place in this city, all for the good. And it seems to be getting better and better and better. So from that aspect, it's been one of joy to see how the city has recovered, and to see the city take great pride in itself. And there was, it was almost like the city had an inferiority complex for a while. You go back and compare yourself, the city. Back in the 50s, we were the same size as Dallas. And we were competing with Dallas. And then all of a sudden we went the wrong direction. We made some bad decisions. We did some urban renewal. We tore down infrastructure, which just makes no sense. Waco did the same thing. They tore down half of downtown Waco. And it took them 40 years to recover from that. So, but anyway, we've recovered from that, and I think we already are a great city, but I think we're going to be a city to reckon with.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. And you're right. It is fun to watch our basketball team right now, because they are having fun, right? They look like they're just they don't look like they're playing in an arena. They look like they're playing pickup with their mates. Right. And just
and they're cheering each other on. For Wiggins the other night to score 41, and watch all the starters. They're just cheering him on and yelling and throwing stuff. It's just amazing.
It really is, and hopefully this is the year. And obviously we had the whole Westbrook era and KD and come really close, but
I had season tickets up until a couple of years ago. Since the New Orleans came here, so I love basketball. I have season tickets to OSU. We're not doing so well right now.
OSU basketball. I mean, the women are actually doing pretty good at the moment. Men, not so much, but it'll go up and down. How long do you stay in the FBI before you go work for the state?
During the bombing, I worked with Governor Keating extensively, and his wife Kathy. I had known him professionally back in D.C., but really not that close. But we got to know each other a lot better, dealing with victims' families, and I would brief him on where we were. He was always honest with me. He said, "Bob, don't tell me anything that I have to keep secret. So more than likely, I'll just share it." I said, "I won't. Okay, I'll just give you what's public information." Frank is so honest to a fault that he really would have difficulty holding something back. But we got to know each other better. I remained in the role as the incident commander for the first 4 days, and then the FBI brought in Weldon Kennedy from Arizona. We had after we finally did an after-action review in Waco, it was recommended that we bring people from the outside on a major event because of sometimes there's a lot of hard feelings on these cases. In Waco, relationships with the Texas Rangers was severely damaged. They felt like they were slighted, and they placed the blame on the agent in charge in San Antonio, which made continual relationships tough because he was still there. So we believe that we should bring somebody from the outside to take over the face of the investigation. I still kept an office at the command post and stayed on until October. doing dual roles of working the investigation. All of the key investigators were all my personnel, people that I had assigned. I put the investigative team together. So I was briefed daily on where we were and participated in the investigative process. But it got to the point where I was assured that we had solved it, and we had all the major figures, and that the prosecutions were set to go forward, and we were in good shape. And I got a call from Keating's office asking me if I'd be interested in talking to the governor about joining his cabinet. And I said, sure, because I was at that period of time where I'd now been in federal government 26 years, and we have a mandatory retirement in the FBI. You have to retire at age 57, and I was 51 at the time, and you're more employable when you're early 50s than late 50s.
Right.
So it was time to leave.
Okay.
And so timing was good. I'd already been talking to some private groups about going to work for them. And in fact, one was, I had an offer to work for the motion picture industry back in California, and some local jobs, but I really wanted to stay here. Yeah. So I said, sure, I'll talk to you. So he asked me about taking over the Highway Patrol, DPS, and being a cabinet secretary for safety and security. Okay. So we agreed, and it was good.
Yeah. I'm sure you're working with Highway Patrol between May and October. April and October as well, right?
Well,
before you take that cabinet job to go work with
they had a role, but it was a limited role. They really weren't in part of the investigative team. They were there part of the rescue and recovery, which I worked with them. They had their own command post down there. Yeah, and they also did some security work as well. Okay, but they kind of started to fade away more from the bombing.
So you follow Governor Keating, you go work for securities and safety. Yeah. How was that experience compared to being in the FBI for 26 years?
Well, people think it's greatly different, but you're dealing with people. Yeah. And it's really no different. They're just different people with different backgrounds, different experiences. Salt of the earth people. Your Highway Patrol people are made up of mostly rural people they're loyal, they're patriotic, they're the salt of the earth, as I said, that will do anything for you. I mean, initially, in fact, they were so used to just saying, what are my orders? And I'll go do them. Yeah. Yeah. And I was trying to change that culture to saying, no, I want you to be the commander. You're the commander on the scene. I want you to be more creative, and you come up with solutions. How are we going to make this the best highway patrol in the country? And try to make it the most professional group we could have. And I think we ended up with that. I mean, I think we had, in most measures that we were able to do, we were at the very, very top. Yeah. And my hope is they're still there. I assume that they are.
Yeah. How long were in a cabinet position for?
8 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And after that, you're thinking, I'm finally going to retire. I'm going to go play golf for the rest of my life and enjoy your backyard that's on the golf course for the last 30 years.
I had worked for Frank for 7 years, roughly, because he was elected governor in 94, got in office in 95, January 95, and I didn't join him till October. Then he was term limited, and so I did another year under Brad Henry. Okay, but it was a different situation because Frank loved law enforcement, and we had more of a personal relationship. And Brad Henry's priorities were more education and other things, and law enforcement was nothing that he really understood, or I know he cared about it, but I can't say he cared about it like Frank did. Didn't have a background in it at all. FBI, right. He was a practicing lawyer before he got into politics. So there was a certain unease that I wasn't his guy, and that I wasn't ready to retire. I was still not that
58 years old, right? You're still
Yeah,
kicking,
it's
yeah.
8 years. I'm like 59, 58, something like that. And I have a police officer at church that approaches me and says that the present chief in Edmond is under a vote of no confidence, and they're looking for a new chief, and they've now asked for applications, and that they've talked to the union, and the union has said that they would like for me to be the new chief. I said, well, that's flattering. I said, when does the application have to be in? He says, Monday, tomorrow. Well, I don't even have a resume. Frank didn't ask me for a resume.
Right.
The last application I filled out was in 1969 for the FBI. So I had to go put together an application and get it submitted by the next day. And I go through this long process, but I get selected as chief of police there in Edmond.
Were you surprised, or did you think, oh, I can do this? Like, it seemed like a logical step. I assume you spoke to your wife about it and you know, like, oh, I'm going to go do this. You've obviously been an Edmond resident for a very long time.
I probably wouldn't have done it in any other town, but being in the town where I had lived now for 20-something years, roughly, I thought, well, this would be. It's really the opposite. Most people go from local law enforcement to state law enforcement and then to federal. Well,
you did the opposite.
I went backwards. I went from federal to state to local. In fact, somebody made the comment, says, I guess your next step is going to be the security guard at Oak Tree. I said, no, it's not that way either, too.
Post golf marshal. Golf course marshal. Keep people on time.
But again, it's dealing with people. And found out we had just some great people at Edmond. And I think we have the best police department in the state. So I did my best to try to make them the most professional organization that we had, and by all measures, they're there as well.
Yeah. I had one of your former officers on the podcast, Jeff Moorfield, recently. So he had great things to say. I'm sure would love to reconnect. Finishing up, Kyle asked a question. Kyle, a mutual friend of ours and mutual board member, asked if there's anything of all the career that you've had, the things that you've seen, all the things that you've had to experience, and obviously, you know, gratefully been successful catching, you know, doing investigations and closing investigations. Is there any investigations that remain unopened that keep you up at night?
I don't say they keep me up at night. Sometimes though they flash back. I had a particularly vicious murder case in California where they dumped the body on a military base. And so because the body was on a military base, this is now the FBI's responsibility. We got close to a number of people, but we were never able to solve that. And those haunt you more than anything, unsolved murder cases. I had another murder case that a woman was viciously murdered, and that one was not solved either. Probably one of the most rewarding cases was I had a kidnapping case in California where they had snatched a young lady from her house. She was the daughter of Mr. Stater, who owned Stater Brothers grocery store chains in California. But they took her and tied her up in West Hollywood, but we were able to solve that. I was assigned to the family during that time period, and to keep them comforted while we were trying to rescue their daughter, and we were able to bring the daughter back to the family and to see the expressions on their face, to return their daughter to them. And she was banged up a little bit, but really not harmed that much. That's one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done. Had another kidnapping case, unfortunately, where they ended up killing the person they'd kidnapped, and that was obviously not a one that in your memory is good. One of the things in that one, I hate to keep talking about cases, but I was in the command post, and we were, FBI was the best in the world at kidnapping cases, but we had a boss that we always got him at the drop site. That's where you're going to solve it, is you've got to get them at the drop site. And at the drop site, when we dropped the money for the kid that had been kidnapped, it was an industrialist out of Detroit and in Palm Springs area. He said, "Don't grab him, just follow him." And I'm saying, "You really want to do that?" And
You're gonna risk the following him too.
And we ended up losing him in the surveillance of him, and then the kid dies like 2 or 3 days later. So that's one that kind of haunts you too.
I mean, thousands of cases, right? Over your year, over your career. If this is not just, a couple of hundred here. I mean, there's thousands of cases so many times, and all over the country too.
Right.
Finishing up, because I know, like I said earlier, we could sit here and tell stories for days. Something a little lighthearted. What's your favorite golf shot you've ever hit?
My favorite golf shot?
Yeah, just first thing that comes to your mind, a favorite golf shot you've ever hit.
I'll tell you one. We won the Southwest Conference in 1966. It's amazing how you can remember certain shots, but I had already beaten my guy for TCU. I was playing well. I was like 4 under par. And my partner was right about even with his partner, but we were one down on the team match. So, I'm 2, he's our 1 and 2 playing their 1 and 2. And their number 1 is a really good player. And the coach comes up. I had just closed out my guy. I think I beat him 4 and 3. And so it's on 16 at Ridgewood Country Club in Waco. It's a really nice club. It's where President Bush always played when he was down there. And but it's right on the lake, and the wind's blowing. It's only about 140 to 50 yard shot, but he comes up and says, "We got to have a birdie here." And that's kind of, you usually don't say that. But anyway, so we had to tie up the match, and we knew it was between us and Texas and Arkansas. We were all within a couple of points of each other, and this last match was probably going to determine whether we won the Southwest Conference or not. So I hit a 7-iron then back from 140 yards, but the wind's blowing really hard, about 25 miles an hour off the lake, and I just lace it, and it's up there about 10 feet. And the one I really remember is rolling that sucker in. And so we now are squared up the match, and my partner on the next hole sinks like a 40-footer, and we go 1 up, and we close them out on the next hole. Just had to tie the last hole, and we end up winning the Southwest Conference by half a point. We beat Arkansas, came in second, and Texas came in third. And there's nothing better in the world than to beat Texas, because Texas sucks.
There's your Instagram reel. There's your clip. Love that. How many hole-in-ones you had?
I've had 1.
Okay.
And that's it. And I've had over 100 shots, eagles, and stuff from the fairway. But I've had 1 lousy hole-in-one. And the remarkable thing about that was I was playing in an FBI tournament at Coffee Creek. And I think it's either the 17th hole. It's no longer there.
Yeah.
It was sometimes they'd reverse the 9s, but it was like 8 or 17. And I remember getting on the tee box, and it's sharp par 3 downhill. Wind's blowing left to right. And I'm on the tee box. I said, this is stupid. You've never made a hole in one. I mean, I'm literally thinking this. And I said, I'm tired of this. I said, I'm going to make this shot. I'm saying this in my head. And I see the shot. The shot has got to be a draw into the wind and hit it about 10 feet left of the flag, let it release, and then draw, and then release into the hole. And it just came out exactly the way I pictured it. Just turned over, hit, released, turned in the hole. The guys in my group, they're all screaming and yelling. I said, no, I knew I was going to make it. I mean, I wasn't cocky. I said,
Right.
I'd already seen it before it went in. I knew I was going to make it.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing that
It's crazy.
you can see it and you know it's going to happen, and it comes off.
Yeah.
I had a fellow that was a family friend named Dutch Harrison Pope. He's in the Hall of Fame. He won almost 20 tournaments. He was called the Arkansas Traveler, I think, but he was an unbelievably good player. And he knew my dad well, played with him some, but he came to Del Rio and we were playing, and he said, "What'd you think on that chip shot?" And I said, I was thinking of getting it close. He said, "Well, isn't that the dumbest thing you could do?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Why aren't you thinking I'm going to make this shot?" And I said, He said, "Because if you make it, you're never surprised by it. And then your whole thought is, how do I make this?" And then all of a sudden I started chipping in so many times. It was crazy.
Yeah. It's amazing, right? The power of the mind and the and visualization.
Absolutely.
And obviously
and you
it's
can see
different
it and then know it's going in.
Yeah. In sports, it's people, athletes have that, sometimes probably more examples of it in athletes where you're taking, you're kicking or you're hitting a golf ball or whatever it is. But yeah, when it happens, you're like, it's just like that in the zone Zen moment.
And it's not a surprise. He said,
not at
he
all.
said, and that's
Total
exactly what he
calmness,
said
right?
was, it won't be a surprise when you make it
Yeah.
because you've already seen it.
Oh, wow. When was that?
Oh gosh, I was probably about 15 years old or 16.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. So the hole in one was at Coffee Creek?
Yeah.
Later, obviously a lot later than.
Oh yeah. It's been about 10 years ago. I
Okay.
think.
Wow. Well, last question, because my day job is real estate, so I always love to throw this one in, which I'm not going to be surprised by your answer at all, because I know that you've lived in your spot for so long. But if you were to build your dream house, no questions asked, no unlimited budget, where would it be? What would you have?
I would want more than one.
Okay.
I'd want one for the winter and one for the summer.
Okay.
And probably I would build it one for the winter in Palm Springs. If you played out there,
It's dome golf, right? 72 every day.
oh,
Perfect.
it's just absolutely perfect in the wintertime. And what course? I'm not even sure what course, but because there's so many good ones down there. And then the summertime, I probably still would like to be here. I mean, I can't think of a better place. I would want it on water. I just love the sight of water. To me, it's calming, and on a golf course, on the water, would be my ideal.
All right. Great spot.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
You
Thank you for your
bet.
stories. Look forward to playing more golf with you.
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing you a few times a year in our board meetings for
You
the
bet.
Oklahoma Golf
You bet.
Association, doing some great things. It's going to be an exciting year. And obviously you've got a lot of things this year for 30th anniversary. And so I'm sure I'll bump into you there. But I really appreciate your time.
Good.
And I mean, congratulations on an incredible career and being chief of police. And
There are a couple of documentaries that are coming out.
Okay.
I think one's the History Channel, and I think the other one's Netflix. I'm not sure, but there are two in the can that I've already done
Yeah.
that will be coming out.
All right. Well, I'll keep an eye on those.
Yeah.
And then when they do come out, I'll let everybody know. But
Yeah.
appreciate you, mate.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Pleasure.
Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHOF. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.